Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. It's the Project Orchids time. We had an appropriate gap since the last set of updates, and the format will be the same. We'll be looking at a still photo of what the plant looked like in the last set of updates, which would have been update 1, and then I'll do a video clip of what it looks like now in update 2. And yeah, we'll see where we go from there. I think there were 6 plants in each part. There's 4 parts. This one, part 1, is the Oncidium types, and I think we started with 6. We have no longer got 6, and the number never goes up, so you can guess what's happened. But yeah, so I'm going to stick to the same format and spread them out over the month of September so that they're not all too close together, because they're quite long. They end up quite long videos because I've got to chat about the what they looked like last time and what I was expecting of them, and then chat about what they look like now and have they achieved what I was expecting, better, worse, all that sort of thing. So let's get going with plant number 1. Okay, first one up then is the Aliceara Tahitian dancer. I think there's a fair old bit of Oncidium sotoanum in this. Very fragrant, produces pretty long strong spikes with branches, good colour. It's got a lot going for it. That might be why I got it. But basically at this particular point, the previous set of 4 growths had all produced a new growth. So at the very front of the plant you've got 3 new growths, one to the right, then one right next to it, then one set slightly back and one off to the left, slightly hidden behind a leaf. But we had 3 new growths, all of which were producing roots to add to what was already a good root system. So at this point at the start of the growing season I was well pleased. A 1-for-1 growth progress, a couple of 2-ups would have been good, but nonetheless 4 new growths, so at least 4 spikes to come somewhere down the line. I've not had it a long time, so I don't know the rate of progress, but at the start of the season looking good. So well pleased. Let's see how it progressed. So excuse me. So what we've got on the Tahitian dancer is a natural progression. Nothing unusual's happened. Basically the new growths that were showing in the still from the last set of updates have pushed on through the growing season, which is what we'd expect to happen. Round the back of the plant, some of the leaves on the older pseudobulbs are fading. Those would be on not last year's growth, the year before. Last year's growth are this set here, yes, out of which the new growths have come. So our new growths are now showing some scale, which I'm dealing with it. As you know, I have noticed once I start using that spray, I know this has nothing to do with the project updates, but it is sort of care and maintenance, I suppose, the scale move up. They tend to head for the leaves. It's as though the base of the plant no longer seems safe for them. Either that or they love the spray and they're just getting to a place where they can get more of it. But yeah, this one has got some. It's not bad, and it's mainly on the older bulbs in the places where the leaf bracts. This is the sort of place they get in here. Yeah, so you just have to make sure that the spray gets into those places, you know, and keep at it, as they say. So what we've got here then is the 4 new growths have progressed. I don't think there's any sign of spikes yet, but there should be soon. Well, I'm just checking, so I haven't had a good look at this one for a while. No, I don't see any spikes yet. Nope. But I suspect they will start soon. The growths are pushing on nicely, but as you can see they haven't formed their pseudobulbs yet. They're starting to swell at the base, and that's a good sign that the bulbs are not far behind. And just trying to think, This was in bloom when I got it, I believe, so I haven't seen new growths. I can't remember how long I've had it. This could be the second blooming for me, I can't remember. But it's doing okay, it's doing exactly as expected, and I would now expect it to push on and get at least one spike per growth. I don't know whether this one is going to attempt to push up 2 spikes on any of these growths, but we should get 4 spikes down the line. So I'm happy with this one, it's doing okay. I believe it's got a good root system. Let's see if it'll come out of the pot one-handed. Yes, we have roots. We have a lot of dead roots on the top here, so a lot of the roots pushed across the top here and didn't remain hydrated because they were above the media. But there's more than enough down in the pot to actually deal with that plant, so it's doing okay. Pleased with that one. Right, next up is the Oncidium chrysomorphum. That was a present from Zena Rapper, who's now sunning herself in Italy, probably desperately trying to get all her orchids set up. Nonetheless, this was a present from Zena. It arrived totally rootless, and I mean 0, as though somebody had burnt them off with a flamethrower. Absolutely not a sign, and no sign of any to come. So it was going to take a little bit of getting going, but nonetheless it did. And once the roots started, they really took off. So at this particular point, again, start of the growing season, we had a new growth out to the left there, progressing basically. So not a brand new growth, but nowhere near mature yet. And we had a reasonable root system. So what I would expect from this, given it's heading into the growing season, is for that new growth to push on and mature and hopefully produce a spike. It's got leaves to back it up and bulbs and a root system now, so in theory there's no reason why it shouldn't bloom once it matures. Obviously it's got to get that far first, so well, let's see what happened to this one then. Now this one's progressing nicely. I know it's a while back now, but this one started with 0 roots, zilch, nothing. So any roots on this is progress. But last time we looked we had a new growth. Well, that's progressed nicely through the growing season. It's not fully mature yet and no sign of a spike, but then it's a new plant to me as far as blooming is concerned because it was in bloom when I got it. So I don't know how mature the bulbs have to be before a spike is formed, if you see what I mean. But we do have a maturing growth here, and we've already got another new growth started in this gap here, poking out through the top. So there's another new growth on this plant pushing on, which is good. We do have a reasonable root system on here now. I'm quite pleased with that. Starting from 0, that's good going. Yes, so again, I would expect this to bloom down the line at some point. I don't know how long, we'll have to wait for that. And another new growth on its way. And I suspect that at some point this will also produce a new growth from this side of the plant. So if it gets a move on and does that reasonably quick, it might, you know, they might be closer together, because at the moment that's quite a staggered pair of growths. This one almost mature and this one only just starting, so they're a long way apart. So if they both bloom, the blooms will also be a long way apart, but then it will seem like it blooms twice a year, which is a bonus. So 2 spikes at once is also a bonus, but you know, spreading the load and more than once a year is good stuff on some plants. And this is what happens with a lot of Oncidium types, is that they have staggered growths on them, so they get a reputation of blooming more than once a year, and it's purely because the growths are out of phase, and that can happen naturally. But if you think like back to the Tahitian dancer, 4 new growths, all roughly at the same stage, that plant's not out of phase at all. All of those growths will bloom together, and that's the normal way. But on this one, this is a species, don't forget, it's got 2 growths that are completely out of step. And that could be due to root disturbance, translocation from the other side of the planet and the southern bit of it, getting over to here in the northern bit, that can upset a plant. So all sorts of things could have warranted, you know, the change in its growth pattern. But at the moment, I'm happy with the progress, especially with the roots.
This is one of my notorious non-performers. I've had this years and it just won't grow and it won't bloom. But finally it looked like it was going to do something sensible. But as a real struggler, I thought putting this in the project plants would be useful. Can't have all the good stuff. So at this point we had a little new growth off to the left there that looked weak to me. That didn't look right. And the previous new growth off to the right wasn't very good at all. You can see the old bulb in the centre. That's the sort of size they should get to. That's what was on it when I got it, and I've never achieved anything like it since, and it hasn't bloomed since, and it's years, and I mean years. This was due a repot on the grounds that it had quite bad algae in the pot, and having put it in the black pot, that algae died, so it was decomposing. So this was in desperate need of a repot.
Now this notoriously notorious non-performer was starting to look as though it was progressing a bit last time we looked. We did have a new growth coming out. That's half matured. That is nowhere near a full-size growth. It's not going to bloom, but at least it grew. And that's more than this plant has done for a very long time. But what it's done now is I could see signs of some new growths, and I took advantage and repotted it. It was heavy on algae, the pot. And although I'd put it inside a dark pot, which I need to do now, I forgot, basically the algae then died. So the pot not only had a lot of algae, it was dying and dead algae, which is not good because it decomposes. So basically I took it out and repotted it, and it looks like the timing was reasonable because we now have new roots growing with the new growths. So that's good stuff. So it didn't have a lot of roots on it, but it had some. They're now buried in the pot. You won't be able to see much of those. There wasn't that much left, I must admit. But given the new growths and a nice fresh media under it, I expect these two new growths to actually get to a reasonable size. And hopefully it will now progress, and maybe we'll just get a bloom on one of these two new growths. This was in bloom when I got it, and it hasn't done it since, and that's years. Not mucking about. It's a long, long time. Why this one's still here, I really don't know. And it's reasonably obvious. I like the blooms. Anyway, so that's effectively been started again. You know, it's had its root system trimmed right back. All the old and dead roots gone, not leaving a lot. Fresh media, no moss, and new growths beginning some roots. When this grows well, the roots are quite almost invasive. They're thick, they're chunky, and they grow quite fast, and they can fill a pot quite easily. So we'll watch the progress on this. I'd be interested now to see what it does with some new media and without dead algae all over the place.
Now this was a relatively new plant back when we looked at it last, and it didn't look as though it was happy. It wasn't like bursting with life. It had signs of two little new growths, and it had a new growth sort of pushing out to the right that had stalled, that looked like it was going to die back. It didn't have a very good root system. I decided to mount it simply because I could control the amount of moisture around the few roots that it had and not get it soggy in a pot or anything like that. And I hadn't mounted a Psychopsis before, so a little bit of an experiment. And this looks like it doesn't grow large like some of them. So like I say, new plant, new to get going, not yet established, not got a good root system. So I don't know what I really wanted from this apart from keeping it alive for a bit. That would be good.
Now the Psychopsis is struggling, quite honestly. It had a new growth which is the one sticking out the side, yeah, that stalled and wouldn't grow. It then produced 2 more new growths, and both of those rotted. And then it did nothing for a bit, and then the new growth that was stalled on the right hand side there decided to grow and is now pushing on and opening a new leaf. And there's one little new root. Well, it's no good chucking a root out there. You need to get some roots out of the base and get onto the mount and in the moss and all that sort of thing. But I noticed a short while ago we've got another new growth right at the top. Now, any roots that growth produces, if it doesn't rot, will attach. So it's struggling. It gets good humidity in here. I think what I'm going to do with it temporarily, or at least for a while and see what happens, is I'm going to get it out of the light. I'm going to heavy shade this one, and get it in some real heavy shade and see if that perks it up. Like give it a rest from light, basically, because light makes a plant work. It's photosynthesis and everything, and for that to happen, it has to have other things going on. So I think we'll just give that a rest for a bit and just get it out of the light and see if it'll, because the leaves are quite pale. Got an old leaf dying there. That's an old bulb, that is. But at least it's produced one new growth that looks like it's going to succeed and open a new leaf, and it's started another one. So we'll see what happens with it, but it's struggling. It's not growing well, but at least it's doing something. And I think I'm just going to try that in the shade, heavy shade. Let's get it right out of the light for a bit and see if it changes its growth habits.
Right, last time we looked at the Tolumnia Peach, we actually had a spike in bloom. The only one in this set, actually. This is one of my better Tolumnias. It seems to be a stronger grower than quite a few of the others. It has produced, over the years I've had it, a very, very good root system, some of which is in moss and some of which is just bare on the mount. Those roots progress through the moss and out the other side, effectively, which is what I like to do with my Tolumnias. That way the bare-rooted ones get the fast wet-dry cycle as it's supposed to have, but because that can be a little bit too quick sometimes, those in the moss get longer to hydrate the plant. That's how I like to work. But this was a reasonable looking plant with blooms, and I've always been pleased with the way this one grows. Some of my Tolumnias struggle a bit and some just rocket away, and this is one of those that really gets a move on.
Last time we saw this one, it was actually in flower. Those eventually finished after branching on the spike a fair few times, so it was in bloom for a very long period with successive branches coming out of the spike. So that was good stuff. Once the spikes have gone, which is the position we're in now, whoops, we've gone back into growth. So we've got a lovely strong new growth coming out there, down the bottom of the plant. Got another big strong one coming up the back there. There's a new one just starting on the right that's about 2 inches, and just in front of that there's another tiny little green shoot. That's another one starting. And this right hand side of the plant is the oldest part of the plant that's showing some signs of dying back now. So it's progressing mainly to the left. But got some good new growths, good strong new growths producing good new roots out of the bottom. They'll get down in the moss and attach. I mean, this has got a good root system anyway, and a lot of these older roots attached to the mount are still white, so they're still very active. I was going to say this one even went round the back of the mount. So good root system, not a lot of moss, just about enough to keep some of the roots hydrated longer than if it was bare rooted on the mount. If you've got a Tolumnia in warm weather, even if you've got good air humidity, if it's bare rooted on a mount like this, you should really be adding water to it. I won't say watering, because you could be spraying it several times a day in warm weather. So I get round that by having a reasonable amount of moss, but not too much. So a lot of the roots are bare, which means they dry ultra fast, which is part of what it needs. But it also needs to have the roots wet long enough to at least be able to get hydrated. Those are the roots in the moss. Yeah? So I split the difference. It's not bare rooted, but it's not buried in moss or any other type of media. And it's doing okay. I suspect we'll get another 2 spikes on that in the not too distant future. The new growths are pushing on nicely. They look like they're going to be bigger and stronger than anything that's been on the plant before, which is good. So yeah, good progress on that. Well pleased.
This Miltonia Queen Ann has all the hallmarks of being virused. I've mentioned it quite a bit in the past, and it was put in here so that we could sort of watch its progress on a regular basis, should there be any. Now, although it has all the hallmarks of a virus, including the previous blooms had really bad colour break, which was the sure sign, but even though it produced 4 new growths, they're not growing properly, so it's far from a happy plant. And at this particular point, all I was waiting for was for a spike and some blooms to make the decision. If the next set of blooms were going to have colour break, this, you know, and we've still got deformed, immature growths, then basically it was not going to be long for this world, was it? It was almost predetermined.
And this is the Miltonia Queen Ann that we suspected had a virus. Produced a spike, half opened a bloom, enough said. Serious colour break on the bloom, so that has been dumped. So there's a gap now. There's one missing. It was expected. This was not a surprise. It's been playing up for some considerable time. It's been living in isolation, you know, watered separately. Basically the way I was watering it, as it was a mount, was I was pouring its water and its feed over the mount and just letting it go straight on the floor, so it didn't get near anything else. And then, you know, put it back so that it wasn't touching anything. But it was expected, and it has now ceased to be.
Now this Brassia Santa Barbara, last time we looked at this we had a spike with buds, which was odd because it had produced 2 new growths, one out to the left with the spike on and that one out to the right. Now the one out to the right was behind, it was staggered, so it wasn't mature at this point, so I was still expecting that to produce a bulb and actually bloom. But this was its first rebloom for me. It was bought in bloom from Burnham's the previous year when I went to their 70th anniversary do. I think that's when I got it, along with the big one, the Veracosum Sea Breeze. I got them both together. I do like Brassias, but you do have to put up with size if you go for Brassias. They are pretty big plants. They can be incredibly vigorous. They are notorious climbers. They will try and get out of whatever you put them in or on. You can mount them, they'll still try and get away and head for the air. So you have to put up with that. If you're going to go for Brassias, that's how they grow. But anyway, we had buds, so we were about to get some blooms, and yeah, it had been repotted since I got it, so it was a matter of hopefully good roots and progress. That's what we can expect.
Now this one didn't do as expected. It produced new growths, so two leads effectively. It's going to be a bit of a climber, but then most Brassias are. This produced a nice bulb and was in bud last time we saw it. That obviously bloomed, that was fine. This one didn't. But since that particular time, this one has gone on to swell up. It stopped. It stalled effectively. But in the last month, I would say, this bulb has sort of gone on to basically become almost full size when it had stalled. And I don't know if you'll see it, but right down in there is a sign of a spike. So this one may still bloom. I'm not saying it will, but it's also got swelling at the base, which looks like the new growth will start soon. And this one has already started its new growth. And it's imperative when you've got a growth like that that's well above the media that you get these sheaths out of the way so that whatever roots come out go straight downwards and don't make any effort to head skywards like they will if they're enclosed. So it's quite important to make sure the new growth has a clear guide straight down into the media, at which point the roots will go down in. And roots from here will go into the pot. Some of the roots that came out here lack of hydration, so the tips have stalled, but a lot of these new roots did go down in the pot, and virtually all of the new roots on this new growth went down in the pot. So a lot of new roots on the plant, and we've got an absolute pot full of roots. Yeah, so it's that side of life is good. What I would expect from this now is a possibility of a spike on here. If it does spike, I suspect the new growth may start but not grow very quickly, and I'd expect this new growth to push on at a rate of knots now and bloom in, well, approximately a year's time. Well, something like that, maybe less. So doing okay, pleased with its progress, and not doing anything unexpected, apart from the fact this growth was a little behind this one, but this one's bloomed and been forgotten, and this one hasn't, but it looks like it might do. So they're completely out of step now, and no idea why that happened, and that is unexpected, I would say. But nonetheless, the plant had been disturbed. It got repotted, had to recreate a valid new root system to get its strength back. So it's doing okay. I suspect it will carry on its progression as it goes, and we'll get some more blooms somewhere down the line. Maybe sooner than I thought, if that spike really does progress. We'll see what happens. So there we go. That's part 1 of update 2, the Oncidium types, and parts 2, 3 and 4 will follow as the month progresses. They won't all be squashed up together, there'll be gaps, and we'll see how we go. So thanks for dropping by, hope you enjoyed it, and see you next time.